My name is Monique Vani. I'm here on behalf of the People Forest Partnership to help moderate this very timely session entitled Voices of Indigenous Peoples and Local Communities, Faces of the High Integrity Carbon Market. Historic COP for me. We have seen an Indigenous leader for the first time in history lead a negotiating delegation, and although so much remains to be done in terms of representation and access to Indigenous people in the decision-making spaces, it's been incredibly exciting to finally hear their voices and hear their calls to action in these often rarefied spaces. One message that we have heard loud and clear is that Indigenous communities, as guardians of 85% of the world's forests, demand direct access to climate finance. They have been voicing not only the urgency of this plea, but also highlighting their capacity to receive and manage these funds and produce impact. In that sense, this is a timely session because we are bringing around the variety of stakeholders, IPLCs and practitioners and governors that we should be seeing in sessions that are going to define what a community of practice looks like for high integrity carbon markets with adequate inclusion and co-design with and by IPLCs. So it is time that we move on to the how, because we have really heard enough from IPLCs what the what should be. I would like to introduce our panel. First we have Selvin Perez, an Indigenous leader of the Maya Quiche ethnic group in Guatemala. He is the president of the UTS Community Forestry Network in Guatemala and works and represents with 40 indigenous organizations. He has a master's in development and highly experienced in the advocacy space. After that, we have Dominic T. Johns. He's a REDD Plus convener, native-born Liberian and convener of the Liberian REDD Plus Technical Working Group, the RTWG. He coordinates this group that includes government, civil society, development partners, the private sector, and communities. And he's also the team lead of a local NGO called Champions for Change. After that, we have Dr. Mary Molokwu, who is Fauna and Flora's country manager for Liberia, who is an internationally recognized conservation leader with great expertise in working in protected area management and transboundary conservation and community-based natural resource management. She is well known within Liberian circles for her ongoing efforts to force the engagement of policymakers to enable more inclusive conservation policies. We have Beto Borges, who is a recognized expert on Indigenous rights with over 30 years of experience in this space. He has been working on building representation for IPLCs through the People Forest Partnership, through Forest Trends, and is now spearheading an Indigenous-led coalition for voluntary carbon markets called Equitable Earth. We have Dr. Alan Channer, who is a specialist on the nexus between environmental restoration and peace building, and has great experience in channeling climate funding at community level for agroforestry systems and food security. So I will let the panelists speak now, starting with Selvin Perez, please, if you could go ahead.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Selvin Pérez, como ya me presentaron, soy de Guatemala, Quiyahu Sacriqui Guanojel, Altomab, Abomab, Alabom, Xoquip, Chetuminab, Kamik. ¿Por qué inicio a hablar en mi idioma? Porque estamos aquí en una COP donde no nos entienden el lenguaje. Venimos, tenemos que entender inglés, tenemos que hablar otros idiomas. Si los gobiernos y la cooperación llegara a hablar con nuestro idioma materno, la esencia del por qué nosotros cuidamos nuestros bosques, entenderíamos. Mi idioma es maya quiche, significa muchos árboles, y ahí entenderíamos todo el contexto, ¿no? Mi idioma significa muchos árboles. Mis abuelos, mis ancestros nos han dicho que cuidar los árboles no son objetos, sino son nuestros hermanos. El cabello no es en sí la copa de un árbol, es su cabello. Sus ramas no son sus ramas, es precisamente una parte vital, la raíz todo tiene un sentido. Ahí iniciamos la esencia del por qué cuidamos nuestros bosques. No lo hacemos por dinero, no lo hacemos por recibir beneficios tangibles, lo hacemos porque amamos, es nuestra madre, y como decían nuestras hermanas estos días en la COP, la Madre Tierra está sufriendo y nos está haciendo un llamado. Vengo a presentar aquí felizmente dos casos, precisamente. Somos miembros de la Alianza Mesoamericana de Pueblos y Bosques. La Alianza Mesoamericana de Pueblos y Bosques viene a presentar dos ejemplos concretos, uno de nuestros hermanos de Costa Rica. Y aquí nos acompaña también el gobierno de Costa Rica. Si nos sentáramos en esta mesa de negociación, parejos, con un mismo lenguaje, y nos entendieran de que el derecho es el centro de toda acción, estas COP serían diferentes y vendríamos a demostrar precisamente cómo los pueblos indígenas tenemos esa capacidad y tenemos todo ese derecho de manejar esos bosques. Costa Rica, por ejemplo, nos ha dado un ejemplo muy bueno, donde en la mesa de negociación indígenas ya tienen un lugar. Luego el gobierno y la cooperación deja ese espacio para que los gobiernos territoriales crean sus propios mecanismos de consulta, les den el tiempo, porque muchas veces nuestras asambleas suceden a veces una vez al año. Bueno, pero a veces los mismos mecanismos necesitan una respuesta, pero entonces financiemos. Entonces ellos han logrado, nuestros hermanos indígenas de Costa Rica han logrado tener ese posicionamiento y gracias a ese posicionamiento es que lo han logrado entender. Pero son ejemplos tangibles de que los diferentes países del mundo deberían de llevar. Costa Rica es el que ha demostrado nuestros idiomas, entender cómo funcionamos los pueblos indígenas. Tenemos una gobernanza interna. Aquí yo no vengo a tratar de convencerlos a ustedes. Ustedes nos tienen que venir a entender cómo nosotros trabajamos en la comunidad. Tenemos una asamblea, tenemos niños, tenemos mujeres, tenemos hombres que tienen una realidad. El que nunca se ha ensuciado, o el que no trae, como decían mis hermanas, ¿verdad? El que no trae tierra en las uñas aquí en esta COP, significa que nunca ha sabido sembrar un árbol, nunca sabe cómo es mantener la madre naturaleza. Sin embargo, esas necesidades también de estar en estos niveles va a ser relevante. Primer caso, Costa Rica. Deberíamos de aprender mucho más de este país. Ha sido una lucha, tampoco es que ha sido fácil, definitivamente. Ha sido un proceso de años y años, pero es el primer ejercicio de cómo estos mercados de carbono han sido efectivos porque la financiación llega directamente a las comunidades indígenas de Costa Rica. El otro caso que vengo a presentarles a ustedes es el caso de Guatemala. Guatemala tiene dos. Yo digo, Guatemala tenemos como dos Guatemalas, una la biosfera maya y la otra la parte de la cadena volcánica donde está mucha la parte de los pueblos indígenas mayas milenarios. La parte de la biosfera maya, bueno, ahí hay una situación histórica de que las tierras, por ejemplo, ahí son del Estado aún. De narcoactividad, la explotación de las grandes empresas ganaderas de Guatemala. Sin embargo, donde están los hermanos de las concesiones forestales del Petén, han demostrado tener esa lucha y han demostrado tener esa capacidad de gestión y administración de esas tierras. Entonces, inicialmente el gobierno de Guatemala era el que tenía los beneficios, los derechos sobre los mecanismos financieros, sobre acceso a mercados de carbono. Ahora, hoy en día, ellos tienen la oportunidad de poder administrar esos financiamientos que llegan a sus comunidades, a esas concesiones forestales que nos han dado un ejemplo a nivel global. Y aquí está mi hermano Sergio Guzmán, ¿verdad?, de la COFOP. Mis respetos para los hermanos de la COFOP, porque ellos nos han demostrado de que luchando, peleando, a pesar de que la tenencia histórica de esas tierras son nuestras, están a manos de los estados, pero ya demostraron que ellos son los verdaderos bosques, los veros guardianes de estos bosques. Bueno, por eso les decía yo, el centro de negociación debe ser el tema de derechos indígenas. Pero ¿cómo podemos replicar esta experiencia? También ha creado una capa de derechos. Tiene una propuesta muy importante de replicar esa experiencia de los hermanos de Costa Rica y también de la parte también de la biosfera maya con el proyecto Guatecarbon. Tenemos de carbono. Si no metemos estos científicos, con nuestra forma de organización. ¿Quiénes son los verdaderos guardianes del bosque? Son la gente que anda ahí peleando. De hecho, hoy en día, ahí están cuidando las 24 horas del día, los 365 días del año. Son los que se ensucian los pies, son los que ni comen bien, están en los bosques. Pasan 24 horas en el bosque cuidando para que nuestra madre tierra siga conservando. Deberíamos de respetar. Necesitamos mediadores culturales. Es importante esa parte para los gobiernos y la cooperación, los mediadores culturales. Me hablan de carbón y cuando uno habla de carbono, mercados de carbono en mi comunidad, todavía las mujeres dicen, bueno, pero ¿será que es el carbón que necesito para hacer un asado en la casa? O sea, y máxime cuando vienen los expertos a decirnos, no es así. No es el carbón que usamos para asar la carne, es otro elemento, pero si lo hablamos en nuestro idioma, permite una mayor fluidez de esa comunicación. ¿Verdad? Definitivamente tiene que ser así. Nosotros hacemos nuestras asambleas en nuestros idiomas. Cuando yo hablo mi idioma materno, la situación cambia totalmente, como que el panorama, el espíritu negativo que teníamos en un salón de reuniones cambia cuando ya empezamos a hablar el idioma nativo. Las mujeres empiezan a hablar, las jóvenes también empiezan a hablar. Entonces, ahí es donde la mujer que estaba ahí pensativa y hablando de esto, ¿de qué me están hablando? ¿Verdad? Pero cuando ya le empezamos a hablar en el idioma materno, dirá, ah, bueno, de no entienden, pero yo hablo el idioma maya, quiché, por ejemplo, ya ahí la situación cambia, la atmósfera en sí, el espíritu de la comunidad, la esencia comunitaria, ya es diferente. Por eso es importante tener los mediadores culturales y a raíz de eso también ha sido la importancia de que estos gobiernos, tanto Costa Rica como Guatemala, por lo menos en un primer ejercicio, está haciendo un trabajo muy relevante y tangible que los demás países deberíamos de aprender. Entonces, Guatemala vamos a hacer también una auditoría social de los pueblos indígenas. El Banco Mundial nos va a dar financiamiento para hacer una auditoría social de cómo el programa de reducción en Guatemala ha llegado los recursos a nuestras comunidades. Creo que en la próxima COP vamos a demostrar los resultados de ese estudio. Y si no lo han hecho, también vamos a demandarlos, porque ya los pueblos indígenas estamos en la capacidad de demandar. Aquí no venimos a negociar, venimos a demandar a los gobiernos que cumplan ya. Y hay excelentes ejercicios como Costa Rica y el caso de la biosfera maya de Guatemala. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Selvin, for your contribution. I feel that it's important that your point about governments recognizing existing instruments and mechanisms that are already alive and efficient within communities to manage natural resources, to audit the use of resources, but also your point about language I thought was very pertinent. I'd like to call next Dominic T. Johns for his presentation.
Good afternoon. So I'm Dominic T. Jones from Liberia, and I'm going to share with you the Liberian REDD Plus experience. Next. Oh, so the Liberia in the forest, Liberia has around 42% of the remaining forest in the Upper Guinea land area. More than 1 billion carbon of carbon stock. We have about 70% of our people, they are actually based feeding on agriculture, which is within that area, and that is livelihood for them. Opportunities for REDD Plus can be used and improved from forest livelihood, and that could also help reduce poverty within our country. Most especially looking at Liberia, is the sink of the world right now with the huge number of forests within West Africa. Next. So where are we now in, where are we? We have done the 4 building blocks according to the Warsaw Agreement. Presently, phase 1 of that is completed, and we are now on phase 2, which is ongoing. Phase 3 has been initiated, and also we want to say credit to the Forestry Development Authority, that's the FDA, who has been one of the leading vehicles on the REDD Plus for Liberia. So I talked to you about the 4 building blocks already. That is on the World Agreement on the REDD Plus. But also it's interesting to note that when we are talking about forests in Liberia, we have a country definition. We have an in-country definition, so Liberia has a country definition on forest. These are some of the institutional frameworks that we have already run through. These are things that we have done personally within on our REDD Plus project for Liberia. The MRV, the REDD Plus MRV framework has been set up. The safeguard system has been operationalized. And next. So now, what is the RTWG, which is the REDD Plus Technical Working Group? The REDD Plus Technical Working Group has a governance arrangement. So it sits there at the top within the office of the president. We have an office there. Then we come down to the National Climate Change Secretariat. So right below there, you see you have 2 mainland government institutions. That is the FDA, which is the Forestry Development Authority, and that of the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. These are the 2 mainland institutions where you have the REDD Plus implementation unit seated at the FDA. Now, on your left-hand side, you see that the REDD Plus Technical Working Group sits there, which is the advisory and technical arm of the policy part of the entire REDD Plus system, which play a very key role in terms of coordinating, in terms of multi-stakeholder meetings where people's voices are heard. Now, if you also look at that, you find that in that, under the REDD Plus Technical Working Group, it comprises of government, civil society, private sector, communities, and all stakeholders. So there where we meet and we have all our issues signed. So follow below, you see also other actors like the Ministry of Agriculture, the Mines and Energy, because when we're talking about forests, we also know that agriculture is inclusive. Also know that we have minerals, right? Government also needs that. So the Ministry of Mines and Energy are also there, and subsequently going downward. Thank you. So what do we do as the REDD Plus Technical Working Group? Like I told you, we took over in 2007 when we started our RP, or initiation of REDD Plus. We are now sitting as an advisory body, and I've already explained to you, we are comprises of various sectors, various stakeholders within the network. And like I said, more key to that is the issue of having the platform where communities can have their voices heard, where government can also share their challenges, where the donor, the private sector, who are also working within the forest area, like logging companies, okay? They can also come there, and at that forum, everyone has a chance to speak. At that forum, everyone has the chance to say out what is hurting them, like in terms of their challenges, and where do we go from there. This is where we meet in order to harmonize and coordinate our affairs. So it's one of the very key points within our forest sector in order to work. Next. So we have the coordination among stakeholders, the mechanism is there, the safeguard. Liberia have a national safeguard system that has been put in place, and is operational at the moment as we speak. Next. So what are those opportunities? So REDD Plus infrastructure is already there, just in case we have other institutions that are working in Liberia, that we already, the country itself has an operational system that is already in place. There are opportunities for protecting and conserving the forest in partnership with communities. As you also know, we have the Land Rights Law of 2018 that was passed. So of course, which gave communities ownership to their land. So in that era, these are done in consultations with our local communities who has rights to their land as well. Now, there is something that is also missing at the moment that needs to be done. carbon is a new thing in our country. And so it's not legislated. It's not on law, but our country is not in our law. So yes, we need to have a clear carbon definition. Now that you have communities are owners of their forests, of their land. So we need a clear carbon definition. And that starts with us because we coordinate all these affairs. So we need to ensure that we have a very clear carbon definition as to who owns carbon right. And then we go down to the next thing is the benefit sharing. How do we do the distribution of the benefit sharing of carbon credits? Okay, so if you're telling community also to do away with logging, you should also understand looking at the present benefit sharing with the logging concessions we have and looking at now doing issue of carbon. So you need to decide how do we go about that. That needs to be clear, also spelled out. The RTW is ready to support this process to ensure that we take board on all stakeholders, like we always have done. We will continue to push that all stakeholders are on board and we clearly define and do the benefit sharing if we must succeed. Thank you. Next. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominic, for your contribution. I think it was very interesting to see how important these permanent discussion spaces for stakeholders are and the crucial role that Liberia is giving to IPLCs in the continued persecution of its REDD readiness strategy. Dr. Mary Molokwu Odozie, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mary Molokwu Odozie, and I work with Fauna and Flora in Liberia as the country manager. I would like to present here today some of the work we are doing, promoting rights-based approaches to conservation in Liberia. Okay, great, thanks. So Dominic has said a few things about Liberia, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. Liberia lies within the coast of West Africa, and it's highly forested. As Dominic said, it covers about 42% of the remaining intact forest of the Upper Guinean tropical rainforest belt in West Africa. It's a rainforest belt that spans between Togo towards the western part of Africa up to Senegal. So Liberia is a small country, approximately half the size of the UK, with a population of about 5 million people. But it holds a lot of important forest, mostly intact, a high carbon stock forest, and rich in several threatened and endemic species. For example, the pygmy hippopotamus is found only in 4 countries in West Africa: Liberia, Guinea, Cote d'Ivoire, and Sierra Leone. And Liberia holds a really important population size of this species. The western chimpanzee, which is endemic to the West African region, the Upper Guinean region, also has about 7,000 populations in Liberia, which is the second largest after Guinea. And Liberia is a stronghold for forest elephants as well. Next slide, please. Sorry, the next one. Thanks. So the forest provides valuable ecosystem services, serving as a critical renewable resource for local communities dependent on the forest, providing food, medicine, and sacred forests preserved for various cultural reasons. Next slide, please. Since the enactment of the forestry reform law in Liberia, which was passed in 2006, the government of Liberia has set out 30%. It has set aside 30% of the country's remaining forests for protection through the establishment of a protected area network. And this aligns well with the 30 by 30 global targets. So this map shows Liberia's main forests, which are restricted to the southeast and the northwestern part of Liberia. And the protected area network consists of 5 established protected areas and 11 proposed protected areas. The protected areas are in red, and the proposed protected areas are colored in blue. So Fauna and Flora started to work in Liberia in 1997, supporting the government to establish operations in the Sapo National Park, which was the first of Liberia's national parks and the largest. And after the Civil War, we started to support the government to restart expanded our operations to the 2 sites, which we are also supporting to be established. In 2018, the Land Rights Act was passed, recognizing communities as customary land owners. And this changed the course of the PA establishment process in Liberia, requiring the government to enter into a series of negotiations with communities for those areas they have previously set aside but have not yet declared as protected areas. So this new process seems to be a bit complex, especially for the Forestry Development Authority, the government agency responsible for protected area establishment. Before now, all of the protected areas that we established have been established as state-owned protected area by legislative means. So Fauna and Flora has been supporting the government since then to work along partners, and we carried out a series of roundtable discussions with the government, especially to bring together the forestry and the land authority to understand how to gradually progress into the new phase of protected area establishment. And this culminated in a conservation area and land dialogue, where we brought partners from both sectors, the land and the forestry sector, together. More than 25 organizations to agree on how to proceed with PA establishment following a rights-based approach. So this led to the signing of a resolution known as the Maison Declaration, which has totally changed the phase of protected area establishment in Liberia, and in which partners have committed, the government and civil society and NGOs committed to follow a rights-based approach to protected area establishments by clarifying land tenure and securing land titles for local communities before engaging communities in the PA establishment process. So in the law, there are a number of options for PA establishment. Like I said earlier, the most popular has been state-owned protected areas. This would be the first time in Liberia where we would have the opportunity, where there would be an opportunity for communities to own and manage their own protected area. So under the Land Rights Act, communities and government may choose to go for several other options for co-managed or community-owned protected areas. And Fauna and Flora is now, we're now working with the government and civil society, supported by donors, to develop regulations for this new designation of community-owned protected areas, and to help communities navigate through this process of the land, customary land formalization. So the Wanegisi proposed protected area, which I mentioned earlier, is also a REDD Plus pilot site, and is one of the first proposed protected area to follow this process. Next slide, please. So after years of engaging in this space, achieving clarity over land rights, that is in Liberia what we call the formalization of customary land in key biodiversity areas, will be an enormous step towards achieving a rights-based conservation, rights-based approach to conservation in Liberia. And we believe that securing land tenure for local communities dependent on the forests would mean more effective forest stewardship and the potential to maintain the resources they have for future generations, and as well to limit external influences. For example, if a logging company were to come in to exploit the resources, this would empower communities to protect their land and ensure that things are done the right way. So it would also help to promote good governance. For example, as part of the customary land formalization process is the establishment of a governance committee known as Community Land Development and Management Committee. And in some areas outside of the protected area network, this has been quite successful. Our work in the PA network would be the first to follow this process of supporting communities to clarify land tenure. But this has been done outside. And one of these communities, called the Panya District Community, recently won an Equator Prize Award. And part of what they've done is to set aside 40,000 hectares of their land for protection. And they have completed the formalization process, which has enabled them to develop their land in a sustainable way, enabling effective and sustainable socioeconomic development. So in the Wanegisi proposed protected area, Fauna and Flora is also, we're supporting communities to clarify land tenure, and it would be the first proposed protected area to go through this process. So I will show a short video to give a small insight to our work, what we are doing in Wanegisi, so that the faces of the people will tell the story for itself. Please, can you play the video? Thank you.
This is our heartbeat. Land has been given back to the original owners, which is the indigenous. And the only guarantee that you can have on this land is a guaranteed deed.
The law in Liberia is progressive because it protects and recognizes customary rights and customary ownership to the land and forest on which they rely. We work with the government and local community to clarify customary tenure rights and ownership to the land and prior to creating protected area or creating any activity that promotes conservation on these target lands.
And can you give us a briefing as to where do we stand with these land harmonization issues and making our citizens to have their own land?
So they completed the process of the mapping process. So on the map, they show where their shrines are, where their sacred places are, where their rivers are, where the burial places are. So they were able to identify where each town is located, where they have forests. So that was a process called community land identification.
Our community as a self-identified customary land owning community with all different units approved by the LLA, government of Liberia, to obtain statutory deed.
To get our rent now, we know our room, we know our rent. So we happy they want to happen today. They show all the like women can get wrecked, but they can get go all that kind of way. You not get wrecked. Woman not supposed to travel land, but we know that woman can fight for them now. So we tell you, thank you that while you bring up and make us to be get sense that we know what to do in Jesus' name. They call me Garment Widow from Bazin One.
We believe that by clarifying tenure rights within this area is an essential step for promoting sustainability and conservation.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think the recognition of community tenure rights is really a foundational step for access to carbon markets, so thank you for that. Beto, Borges?
Greetings, everybody. Pleasure to be here with all of you. So it's really motivating to see so many people with a common goal, right? So, and I think we can succeed. So I'm not going to go through all the slides because we don't have a lot of time, but I will just focus on some slides to kind of illustrate the message that I bring for you today. So my name is Beto Borges. I direct the Community and Territorial Governance program at Forest Trends. Today I'll be speaking about, if you can just go to the first slide, maybe perhaps not so fast. I think two initiatives that we've been working on with other partners. In fact, three: People's Forest Partnership, Equitable Earth, and also the Territorial Governance Facility. So next slide, please. Forest Trends is it's an NGO. It's based in Washington, D.C., but we work globally in several regions in the world. The mission of Forest Trends is to create economic instruments for conservation. And the program that we work with, I've been with Forest Trends for almost 20 years. And I should say that the panel here speaks of indigenous voices, right? So I'm not, perhaps I'm an indigenous, like we all are from the world, but I don't speak on behalf of indigenous people. So, but I've been fortunate to be working with indigenous peoples particularly in the Brazilian Amazon. And I'm not here. Everything that I'm saying is not on behalf of the indigenous peoples. They're my friends, but I don't speak on their behalf. They have very powerful voices of their own. I just want to make sure because of the title of this, so I don't want it to be misunderstood. But as I continue, the Community and Territorial Governance program with Forest Trends, the niche of our work is really to promote the territorial governance in support of our partners, indigenous communities and local communities, in three main areas of work: political governance, cultural governance, economic governance. And within, perhaps for the topic of this panel here today, I'll focus on the axis of economic governance. So next, please. Yeah, you can skip this one. Thank you. Within economic governance, we work primarily in three areas of work: promoting reforestation at scale, also working with local communities to support them in their efforts to promote a sustainable value chain for non-timber forest products, to bring those products to companies in the marketplace. Indigenous and local communities to drive climate and conservation finance to the hands, directly to the hands of the best stewards of the forest. One of which is the territorial governance facility, or the Mecanismo de Gobernanza Territorial, which is a partnership that we've established. We launched this in Glasgow. It's an initiative that we've been developing with the Aliança Mesoamericana de Pueblos y Bosques, CONFENAI, and IDESEP. Which is a mechanism in order to provide technical support and direct finance to indigenous territorial bases. The previous panel we were speaking about the importance that financial flows, both conservation, climate finance flows, go straight to the territorial organizations. It's important to support the political organizations, but most importantly, we believe, is to work hand in hand with the territorial-based organizations, IPLC organizations, that is, and Afro-descendants as well, because they know best to implement the strategies that can make the changes that they need. Next slide, please. And please, if you could take a picture, or we can also get a hold of us later for this webinar coming up right after COP, where we'll be sharing the lesson from this program for the first year of implementation. We've been able to, again, work with IDESEP, CONFENAI, and AMPB together, where we identified several indigenous territorial organizations working with their representative associations in order to identify within what are the strategies that they defined that are the best in their particular context, in their particular regions, to really tackle the challenges of ensuring their territorial rights, as well as protecting their forests from invasions and expanding their territories, seeking for the demarcation. So a number of initiatives, not only initiatives, again, related to accessing climate and conservation finance, but once this finance gets to the ground, what is the best ways that the finance can really bring the changes that are needed from their perspectives directly. So in addition to working with them to support through technical capacity with a number of experts, we're also been working with funding streams to bring direct finance. We're happy to, it's not a lot of money, but we, in a partnership with Avina Foundation, we managed to channel $100,000 directly to these territorial-based organizations. On the 14th of December, we'll be speaking about that. So next slide, please. So as we think about the strategies on how to get forest and conservation finance and climate finance to the hands of indigenous peoples and local communities, many of these communities believe that climate finance in both REDD projects through jurisdictional funding, as well as to project-based finance through the voluntary carbon market, is an option for them. They believe that it can be possible, that it can be made as long as safeguards are in place, best practices are in place. So Forest Trends, through the community initiative, 10 years ago, we supported the Sucre people in Brazil to develop the first REDD project in the Amazon basin, the Sucre Carbon Project. We managed to develop the project and with them, so they were the proponents of the project. That was precedent setting. We generated credits that were both validated by VCS as well as CCBA at the time. We created a fund, which was a consortium of Brazilian organizations. We were able to raise, at the time, $500,000. We spent pretty much that amount of money to create the methodology, but fortunately, we funded that with soft money, and all the $500,000 was went to the Sucre people. And they determined how the money was going to was used. So there are a lot of lessons learned from the process. We also were involved in the first jurisdictional climate finance system in Brazil, the CISA program in Acre. So then, as a result of that experience, we have been gathering since Glasgow organizations, like-minded organizations, and the People's Forest Partnership is really a coalition. Next slides, please. And I will skip the next two slides. You already know what the challenge is, don't you? Next slide, please. Yes, we all have commitments. We all have good commitments. Let's get to the chase. Next slide, please. Our goals, yes, is to end deforestation, drive finance, but next slide, please. Talking about alliances, the People's Forest Partnership is an alliance of these organizations. We have IPLC organizations that you can see their logos, who they are, as well as companies. So far, we have 4 carbon development companies. They are Wildlife Works, Everland, Green Collar from Australia, and we're really happy that Systemic has just joined us, as well as some technical NGOs that have some expertise in the field of climate finance, such as Forest Trends, RECOF, and others, the Fundación Pachamama and others. So together, my friends, we've worked with these IPLC organizations to develop best practices. We came up with 9 principles of what best practices should be in relation to high integrity carbon project development. So we don't have time to go through all of them, but if you look at the People's Forest Partnership website, it's translated to several languages, and you can see what the principles are. They were told to us by the IPLC organizations that we work with. We all can think of best practices as northern NGOs or NGOs from the south, but we wanted to hear from the best practice from the people that are there managing their forests, which is their own right. So next, please. In addition to this effort, a lot has been said about the problems with carbon finance. We stand by the recognition that carbon finance needs to be fixed, standards need to be improved. But the fact is that we believe, I've been working with conservation for 35 years. I work with in the public sector as well as in the philanthropic sector. I know from experience that both public and philanthropy resources in themselves is not enough to tackle the problem at scale that we need. That's why we believe in the market, in the force of the market. The market has created the mess we are in, therefore the market should be part of the solution. But in order to come up with a standard, we all need to, I don't necessarily believe that indigenous peoples and local communities really need to demonstrate that their forest is standing because they're there. So just look at the forest. Just look across the globe. Who are the folks really managing the forest? Are indigenous peoples. However, we, Western world, still are really stuck to metrics, right? So therefore, standards are important, in particularly standards that can demonstrate the effectiveness of carbon finance. So in relation to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, as well as supporting the rights and keeping the forests of indigenous peoples and local communities standing. Next slide, please. So next slide, please. So you can stay with this one. We decided Forest Trends and with 2 of the parties within the People's Forest Partnership, Wildlife Works and Everland, to come together to think through the design of a new standard for climate finance, particularly for the voluntary carbon market. But we also hope that it will be used for jurisdictional funding as well. But the difference here, this is not to say that other standards should be, part of the problem that we believe is that there aren't that many standards. We have to have a few options. I think so far part of the problem that we've been having with standards is that there aren't that many options, especially there isn't any that is led by indigenous peoples and local communities. And if I have anything to say here in terms of a take-home message, what we hope to accomplish with Equitable Earth, this new standard, is that it will be led by indigenous peoples and local communities. The other standards that we have don't have their perspective. They were not designed with indigenous peoples and local communities in mind. So these are, I'm sure you have already read what the standard is going to be. Again, it will be in partnership with local communities, focused to end deforestation. It will be as robust as other standards are, and hopefully even better in terms of demonstrating reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. And most importantly, again, led by indigenous peoples and local communities through their own metrics, working with them to really figure out what are the ways in which we can demonstrate that we can keep forests standing and reduce the climate threat that we're all in. So next, please. So our principles, my friends, are this that you can see: equity, transparency, quality and impact, robust carbon accounting, and as well as having a holistic forest conservation approach. Please, next. Just so you can get an idea, designing a standard, a carbon standard, it's a complex process. It takes time. So we're estimating that it will take at least 2 years. We just begun this work a few months ago, so it's very nascent. We're even wondering, should we be talking about this yet? But we thought, well, okay, why not? Because I think we need, we need to galvanize support for this. So we don't have all the answers, and that's why we're here talking about this. So this is the phase that we are in it. Now we're building a coalition. The standard, the hope and goal is to launch the standard between 24th and 25. So it will be, by the time that it's launched, part of the sort of the mandate for Forest Trends is to facilitate this process so that the standard will be an independent registered owned organization. The companies, Everland and Wildlife Works, they're not developing the standard to just make them look good. They're helping develop the standard because they believe a new standard led by indigenous peoples and local communities is needed, because there's known that it has that being driven by them. And once throughout this process, the next 2 years, they're going to be removing themselves from the process. The standard will exist that hopefully other companies that will adopt the standards as well, those companies that have an invested interest to support the rights of the territorial rights of indigenous peoples and local communities. And then we've been thinking about registering the standard in Brazil. We'll see. We are very pleased. When was it? It was Sunday. We launched the standard, or the process, that is. Don't take me wrong. The process to create the standard. We launched with the support of both the ministries of indigenous peoples of Brazil, with Minister Sônia Guajajara, the first indigenous woman as a minister in Brazil, and also Minister Yi from the Democratic Republic of Congo. So we're very pleased that so we have their support. We'll likely be seeing pilot projects develop with the new standard in both Brazil and the Congo, and which together with Indonesia hold the most forests in the globe. But that's still by 2025. That's when we begin to put this standard in place within pilot projects that we hope to achieve by then. So next slide, please. Right now we are in the process of creating several advisory groups. As you can see, I've been tasked to be the chair for the IPLC, and we should add Afro-descendants in an advisory group. And to me, yes, all this other technical stuff is extremely important. So, but my mandate, my passion, my heart, my goal is to have indigenous peoples, local communities, and Afro-descendants at the center of this. If they're not going to lead this, and if this standard is not going to be led by them, I'm going to be out of this, in a very short time. And I have 35 years working with indigenous peoples, and I'm going to let my name be washed down the toilet if the indigenous peoples and local communities are not really driving the process. You can count on that. So thank you so much for that. Next slide, next slide, thank you. You can take a picture.
Thank you, Beto, for your passionate defense of the participation of IPLCs in the design of the standard. Dr. Alan Channer, please. We have time passing us by, so I would give us 10 minutes for Dr. Alan Channer so that we can have questions from the panel, if that's okay.
Good afternoon. I must say it's an honor to be part of this panel here today, and I want to thank the organizers for including me. I'm here at COP with Initiatives of Change International, which is headquartered in Geneva, and in particular with its program Initiatives for Land, Lives and Peace. And the focus of Initiatives for Change is building trust. And I'll be looking at our theme through that lens. I'm humbled to be trusted by colleagues whose work I'm depicting here. Some of them may be online, so they can hold me to account if I misrepresent them, and I pray that I won't. To help frame our discussion on how land restoration by rural communities can be catalyzed by carbon finance, or at least to help my own understanding, I quickly tried to delve and understand the evolution of carbon markets, and I quickly found myself very out of my own depth. Some of you, of course, are very familiar with cap and trade and mandatory market-based mechanisms and mitigation outcomes, but I found myself starting to flounder. And then I started to look for who do carbon markets impact. I started to see that they impact corporate sustainability leaders, they impact carbon traders, they impact advisory professionals and fund managers, and I struggled to find where they were impacting custodians of the land. I think that is changing. I was delighted to hear from a UNDP colleague yesterday that UNDP has just launched its high-integrity carbon market document. But as we've been hearing, and this is the importance of the presence that we've been hearing of Indigenous people coming and having their voices heard and entering more deeply into these conversations. Of course, these actors are driving absolutely vital, but how do we build the system together? And of course, from the sharp end, we tend to see, it's not a binary, it's a theoretical. Unfortunately and sadly, so many people around the world, IPLCs in particular, what's at the forefront of their lives is their adaptation needs. But here we're talking about primarily, of course, mitigation, very important as that is. I find it quite energizing to get down to earth and to do so with agroforestry, which combines mitigation and adaptation. And in smallholder contexts, it actually is done by IPLC, so it doesn't actually work without IPLCs being front and center. And it's urgent, as many of us know. If you may see, there are some goats, just to get the scale of that gully erosion going on in the Kerio Valley of the Rift Valley in Kenya. And you see how the trees are holding the soil, and that gully erosion is caused because of deforestation of the hillsides and massive flash flooding. So I'm excited to unfold a case study implemented by the Global Evergreening Alliance and funded by HSBC Climate Asset Management. And this program, HSBC Climate Asset Management, is investing $150 million into this, and this program was announced at COP26. So it's almost 2 years old. It's as a case study, yes, because I do work for the Global Evergreening Alliance, so I have an insight into it, but also because it represents, I think, the dynamics in which we can understand, learn from, and I think which will synergize from the experience of REDD Plus and other projects already ongoing for some time. So the goals of Restore Africa are to restore 1.9 million hectares of land, supporting 1.5 million smallholder farming households in 6 countries. And just have a look at there, which in the 10 years that I've been going back and forth there has been degrading consistently due to clearance for cultivation and charcoal. So the objectives of Restore Africa are to introduce and or increase the presence of trees within farming systems, and to bring all the benefits that trees do in farming systems, reducing soil erosion, increasing soil fertility, improving nutrition, shade, honey, medicinal products, and of course, incentivizing, and the cherry on the cake, the carbon credit payments to rural households. So, how does this work? An entity needs to be able to attract and engage the large-scale carbon finance, and it needs to be able to then engage implementing organizations in country. Now, the Global Evergreening Alliance has 90 members, many of them are here, World Agroforestry Center, World Vision, Catholic Relief Services. These are organizations with the track record to engage with this. They form a program management unit within a country, and then they go, based on their experience, and select sites for land restoration. And this is a key. The whole thing depends on this, on the community meetings and engagement. Then tree nurseries are encouraged, set up, and then farmers are contracted into the program with the free, prior, and informed consent protocols. As part of the whole thing, the capacities of farmers are built where necessary. Farmer-managed natural regeneration is encouraged, and the agreements to prevent constraints, grazing, bushfires, and so forth are worked on. And of course, the whole thing starts with a baseline study at commencement, and then every 5 years to monitor, report, and verify the carbon sequestration going on. And rural households then receive payments for the carbon they have sequestered. I think, and I should say that the director of Restore Africa, Dr. Jonathan Muriuki, is with us, and he has so much of direct experience with these kinds of meetings and finding how important they are with farmers, with community leaders, with faith leaders, with local government. All these actors need to and want to understand how this is going to work. And this is happening. It's not like a commitment or something that we're saying is, this is now going on. These tree nurseries are being supported. They are expanding, and trees are going into the ground. Is this going to work? Okay. I find this set of challenges and risks very exciting. It's a bit like feeling the dust in your teeth. You know, if you're dealing with these kinds of challenges and you're there on them, that maybe if you can overcome them, this is going to work. And I think the credibility of our partners, like World Vision, CRS, they're interested in solving these. So getting the right farmers, looking at the land tenure issues which have been so looked at, controlling bushfires, livestock, getting these things happening, and this really can work. And it will work by and through learning by doing and feeding up from communities into the system what communities are discovering and experiencing. So just quickly coming to the conclusions. This will work if the whole system is understood and included. The local context is critical. The community knowledge in each context is critical. And the needs and experience of all stakeholders, the investors, the implementing agencies, and the communities, together are what will bring innovation, emergence, and success to the project. So coming back to this, it is about collaboration. Other panelists have mentioned the different, like for governance, you need the stakeholders to come together, to have the dialogues like they're having in Liberia. These processes need to happen and need to be emphasized for these kinds of large programs to work to get this carbon finance from these very quite complicated systems into the mobile phones of the Kenyan farmer. So with that, I just want to particularly thank those who've made this presentation possible who are doing this work, and to say that Jonathan is here and Caroline von Tilburg, also from Climate Asset Management, is here with us. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Channer. I think this is a great example and how community-based design should look like. They'd like to address to the panel.
I'm Street. I am heartened by what you have had to say. That you are what has been missing. We need our own Indigenous standards. This is what has been missing at the international level. We have Plan Vivo, we have Gold Standard, we have Vera. Indigenous people have been exploited by these international carbon companies for far too long. Indigenous people want their own standard, their own methodologies, their own way of working with each other. So we would like to congratulate you and work with you as we build an entire carbon industry in Timor-Leste and then also Fiji in the Indo-Pacific. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about what you're doing. That's my point.
Amazing. We had another gentleman here with a question.
Thank you. I'm wondering about the new standard that you are developing in terms of the indigenous rights. Para la persona de Guatemala, quisiera saber también un poco como cuál es el estatus en términos de desarrollo del carbono que han tenido ustedes ahí y cuáles fueron como los retos que enfrentaron en términos de las salvaguardas sociales y para la protección de los derechos indígenas. Si ya es que están en una etapa, según entendí, están en una etapa ya de desarrollo de carbono.
If possible, we'll hold you to one question, and then if there's time afterwards, we'll ask the panel the other two. All right, Beto, please.
Well, thank you, my friend. We look forward to talking to you some more. Well, you asked me to speak more about the standard. Like I said, it's not yet a standard. It's a process, because if I were to come here and tell you we have a standard, it wouldn't just be missing the entire point. That the idea is to build a standard with IPLCs. But what I can say, and Afro descendants, what I can say is that I work also with, like I said earlier, with philanthropy for a number of years, and what we've been feeling that is missing is the way by which standards, I mean, they're for local communities because of they're very process heavy, and also metrics that are not understood in terms of how you demonstrate impact. We're not really speaking the language that my friends from the Brazilian Amazon indigenous peoples can really demonstrate, if they even needed to demonstrate, for Christ's sake, right? But so that's part of the challenge. So we welcome any support that we can get, the voices and to learn from the science of indigenous peoples, local communities, particularly, and I say particular because indigenous peoples have been managing their forests for generations. So the idea is here, how can we find ways with them to come up with quote-unquote new metrics to demonstrate performance. And I think to a certain extent, throughout the mechanisms that are really addressing the needs of local communities, if those benefit sharing mechanisms are not designed with participating communities, they're not really going to have the high social integrity as well. So the idea here is how can the standard then come to aid, come to help, come to complement the jurisdictional programs, where it's possible, where we are invited, and I think one window of opportunity is nesting projects, because I can't speak for this comment here pertains to Brazil that I'm going to make. In the case of Brazil, carbon rights belong to indigenous peoples within indigenous territories. I'm personally concerned that jurisdictional programs, they're Brazil, because Brazilian And especially now, my friends, with the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples in Brazil, an indigenous woman will not let that happen. So we hope that the standard can come to find ways to hopefully nest indigenous-led projects within jurisdictional systems so that there can be combined accounting so that both the state as well indigenous lands within the state can really deliver the climate goals that we want, and most importantly, support the self-determination and rights of indigenous peoples.
Thank you, Beto. I think we have time for one quick last question.
Ok, gracias. Quería felicitar a los compañeros de África, Liberia y el otro amigo en Liberia, porque realmente si REDD ha servido para la titulación de la tierra, creo que es lo mejor que pudo haber sucedido, ¿verdad? Porque se está luchando en muchos lugares para darle no una titulación nada más, sino que el reconocimiento territorial a los pueblos indígenas y a las comunidades locales. Por otro lado, igual con Beto, qué bien que está saliendo este nuevo estándar. En la Semana del Clima de Nueva York hablamos de ello, de un estándar, como decía el señor, de pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales, que él lo dijo muy bien. Los que han hecho negocios son los desarrolladores, los que hacen las plataformas de registro, los verificadores, y lo que menos llega es a los pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales. Entonces creo que es una buena oportunidad. Sé que ya la Alianza Mesoamericana está entrando para ser parte de esto y nos gustaría seguir colaborando. Yo vengo de la Reserva de la Biosfera Maya, como dijo mi hermano acá en Guatemala, y hemos sufrido porque no tenemos la tenencia a la tierra, ¿verdad? Y nos han dado las concesiones a los grupos comunitarios por 25 años. Exitosamente se han logrado renovar, pero ¿qué pasa después de eso? ¿Verdad? Entonces, felicitaciones y estamos.
Thank you for your remarks. I'd like to invite José Mario Rodriguez, who is the director of FONAFIFO Costa Rica, to wrap up and provide closing remarks.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias, Mónica. Muy buenas tardes a todas y todos. Bueno, me solicitaron aquí dos cosas. Uno, quisiera resaltar algunos de los aspectos relevantes de la señora panelista, pero también que compartiera un poquito más con respecto a lo que dijo el compañero hermano de Guatemala, Selvin, sobre lo que tenemos en Costa Rica. Entonces yo quisiera iniciar con una de las palabras o de las frases que utilizó el doctor Channer en su presentación. Que como todos sabemos, y en el caso de Costa Rica lo es, son los mayores terratenientes de tierra. Y por lo tanto, si estamos hablando de mercados de carbono, es un actor relevante, importantísimo, que muchas veces no está en la mesa de negociaciones para tomar las decisiones que se deben tomar. Y así, como también lo mencionaron algunos otros panelistas, podemos ver esto como una oportunidad, pero una oportunidad desde el punto de vista no solamente financiero, que también lo mencionaron, sino como una oportunidad para fortalecer la participación y la negociación de los hermanos indígenas y las comunidades locales en la toma de decisiones. Entonces aquí vemos varias cosas de lo que comentaron los compañeros. Uno es que es necesario desde el inicio de cualquier gestión o cualquier intervención que se haga, realmente han protegido y nos han enseñado de cómo hacerlo, que es la conservación de los bosques. Es importante una comunicación fluida entre las partes. ¿Y cómo se hace esa comunicación fluida? No es con el idioma y el lenguaje que nosotros los no indígenas tenemos. Entonces tenemos también que invertir tenemos que invertir metados y sean debidamente entendidos por todas y cada uno de los que participan en el territorio. Mencionaba el compañero Selvin, ¿cómo es posible que en unas reuniones de cambio climático, que para uno era complicado verlo en el año 2009 cuando empezamos con REDD, imagínense lo que sería para un hermano indígena, un ciudadano, una comunidad local en donde el idioma que se habla no es el idioma de ellos? Y el ejemplo claro que dio Selvin es como una mujer en uno de los talleres no participaba, pero cuando se habla en el idioma que le corresponde, la participación es activa, entonces podemos nosotros así beneficiarnos de todo ese conocimiento ancestral que tienen y enriquecer en sí el producto, como queramos llamarlo, la participación y la negociación que eventualmente se pueda dar. Se mencionó aquí también importante de partir del derecho no solamente como persona, como ciudadano, sino también hablamos del derecho de la tierra, porque no todos lados, no en todas las latitudes de nuestro planeta existe claridad meridiana de quién es el dueño de la tierra y por lo tanto el dueño del carbono. Entonces, si eso no se tiene claro, también debemos nosotros ser conscientes de que en una negociación eso no está debidamente clarificado, pues hay un desbalance en la negociación y por lo tanto en el beneficio. Y hablando del beneficio, también importante aquí, que es parte de lo que escuché yo en los diferentes es que se debe tener una claridad también muy importante en cómo se va a distribuir el beneficio. No es simplemente hacer un negocio y que los recursos ingresen al país. No, creo que el negocio es en tanto esos recursos que ingresan sean trasladados, ojalá en transferencias directas a los compañeros indígenas y las comunidades locales que son los que proveen esos servicios. Se mencionó también aquí del cómo es necesario transparentar y dar trazabilidad al uso de los recursos. Y aquí es donde quiero partir un poco lo que me solicitaron para contar un poco las experiencias que también hemos tenido en Costa Rica, como lo decía don Selvin. Bueno, Costa Rica, desde el año 2009 que empezamos con REDD, de veras, yo fui uno de los que estuvieron en el lanzamiento de este programa. Y la realidad es que nos sonó interesante, nos sonó que fuera una oportunidad, pero definitivamente no teníamos nosotros el conocimiento ni cómo transmitir ese mensaje y a involucrarlos directamente a los compañeros indígenas. Entonces, desde ese mismo momento hicimos una reunión y presentarles a ellos como una oportunidad que nos dijeran cómo aterrizar esto. Y ahí fue donde nació toda una situación, todo un trabajo conjunto, gobierno, territorios indígenas, en respeto del consentimiento libre, previo e informado de la Carta de las Naciones Unidas sobre los territorios indígenas, para decirles, nosotros gobiernos vamos a ser facilitadores, ustedes son los que nos tienen que enseñar el camino de cómo hacerlo y cómo trabajarlo. Y es producto de todo ese proceso que sale el resultado final de la Estrategia Nacional REDD, en donde los 24 territorios indígenas que existen en el país definieron los temas especiales y cómo trabajarlos. Y uno de los productos que ellos definieron es que cada territorio indígena tiene que hacer ellos mismos el plan ambiental forestal territorial. Y eso no es ni más ni menos que un documento de ordenamiento territorial, un documento orientador para que ellos mismos definan que si entran recursos, cuáles son las prioridades de inversión, cómo van a fiscalizar esos recursos, cómo los van a monitorear, pero ellos mismos administrándolos. Nosotros, gobierno, lo que hacemos es una transferencia directa de esos recursos. Quisiera ampliar más, ya me está presionando la señora para terminar esto, pero con muchísimo gusto vamos a estar aquí en la COP todavía unos días más para ampliar en eso, agradecerles la invitación que me hicieron y decirles el apoyo irrestricto de nosotros como país a Costa Rica para todas las acciones que ustedes como comunidades indígenas y comunidades locales están haciendo en los diferentes foros internacionales y por supuesto que para los hermanos indígenas costarricenses que pueden dar fe de ello, estaremos siempre con la mejor disposición de trabajar conjuntamente. Muchísimas gracias.